Let's move on, though, Pete, to what has been a horror start to the year for global share markets. The losses, of course, hitting Australian super funds particularly hard. They plunged 2.5% in the first 6 days of trading alone, in the wake largely of those massive losses on the Chinese market, as Alex was talking about earlier. So for retirees who do rely on their super, or for those planning for their financial future, how can you protect the value of your nest egg? Well, the CEO of the Financial Services Council, Loane, joins us this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Dave.
Super funds have had it particularly hard in the wake of what has been a dreadful start to the share market. Put it into context, though. How does it compare to previous years?
I certainly remember during the GFC when my super fund started to go into negatives for quite some time. I think the secret is, as Alex said, is to be patient. Superannuation is a long-term gain. Now, people starting out in the workforce now getting their first pay packets, getting their first superannuation funds, they've got 40 years. So it's a very long-term game when you're looking at super. So we will ride out this particular bump in the road, just as we did the GFC.
It's difficult, though, if you are a retiree relying on those funds and you see the value of your nest egg declining. That's when the panic can set in.
Indeed it is. And I know there were some people earlier when this happened that had to delay their retirement and had to keep working for some time. Look, I think if people have any doubts at all, any concerns, they should actually check with their super fund or their financial advisor. And I think this really goes, if you're talking to your young adult children around the dinner table tonight, talk about superannuation and remind them how important it is to start putting as much away into super as they can, because the magic of compound interest means that in 40 years' time, they're going to have more to retire on than, say, I did, or even, even people in their 40s now. So if you start in your 20s and really think about superannuation, think about the funds that you want to put your super in, look at the value that that fund creates, look at the returns, look at the choices that you can make. Really think about super, because it is going to make a huge difference at retirement, even though that's going to be a long way off for some young people now.
It's your money, ultimately, that you're working hard for, so you've got to make sure you make the most of it. Now, employers, a lot of them do recommend super funds for their workers. Do you, though, ultimately have the final say in where you want to put your money?
Well, not every Australian actually does have choice in their super fund. It might be a surprise to a lot of people to think, well, I can manage my money.
Yeah, I thought that was
the
case.
No, it isn't actually. There are a number of enterprise agreements across Australia where people actually don't have a choice. And I was looking at some figures that the Assistant Treasurer Kelly O'Dwyer was quoting, and she was saying there's something like 5,000 enterprise agreements where people don't actually have a choice. So it really does, I think, fall upon people to look at that, ask your employer, just say, look, do I have a choice about super? And if not, why not?
It can be confusing, though, knowing which super fund. Comparing them is difficult, really, and you do need to get that expert advice. But also looking at setting up a self-managed super fund. Again, it can be very good for your ultimate return, but it can be quite confusing, can't it?
It can, yes, exactly. So people do have a choice whether they want to put their money into a self-managed super fund or into their, another super fund, whether that's a retail fund or an industry fund. Again, it's about educating young people. It's about educating yourself around superannuation. We've only had super for 23 years. I mean, I remember when I started work, it was 3% of my pay packet into super, and everyone's going, what's super?
Yeah.
What does this mean?
What does this mean?
This is
What's
crazy.
so super about it?
Exactly. But it actually, now that I'm sort of, down the track some many years into my own working life, I'm really looking at super and saying, did I make the right choices back then? Did I have a choice to make back then? Starting all over again, I'd probably do things differently. So engage, talk to young people, look at your super fund. Try and work out what you will have at the end of your retirement. Is it going to be good enough for you? And if you don't have a choice, ask your employer why.
Yeah, and get that expert advice.
Exactly.
All right, great to have you in, Sally. Thanks so much.
Pete,
let's try and iron out those gremlins, shall we?
Yeah, super effort there, Deb. Back to our political report.